Today, we are extremely lucky to have Dr. William McBride with us. Dr. McBride was a senior lecturer in the Department of Bacteriology at the University of Edinburgh Medical School in Scotland, and a project investigator in the Department of Radiotherapy and Experimental Radiotherapy at the University of Texas, MD Anderson Hospital and Tumor Institute. He received his Doctor of Science from the University of Edinburgh and was appointed as Director of the Division of Experimental Radiation Oncology at UCLA, as well as the Vice Chair for Research in Radiation. What got you interested in going into the cancer field?
Well, I started off as an immunologist, actually, and I was always fascinated by the idea that we might be able to make immune responses against tumors. That has always been a very difficult thing to do, but it was an enormous challenge in a way. So it really was a combination of the idea that one might be able to kind of use immunology to essentially eradicate cancers, and that's how I got into it.
And what is your definition of cancer? Do you see it being one disease or a complex multitude of many diseases?
It really depends which way you look at it. I mean, every individual has a different type of cancer in some respects, and the real aim is to try and tailor any treatment to that individual. But having said that, there are patterns within cancers which one can follow, so that many cancers have very similar changes in terms of suppressor genes or oncogenes and so on. Understanding basically the molecular kind of aspects of the cancer helps you define the cancer, and once you have that pattern, then it makes it a lot easier to know A, how it's going to respond, and B, what potential treatments might have.
And then, would you agree or disagree with the following statement? No significant progress has been made in curing cancer since we declared the war on cancer in 1971.
Oh, I would disagree. I mean, we've had made enormous strides in many different types of cancers. The sad truth is that some of the biggest killers we haven't done a lot in, but there are many, many cancers which we have. I think certainly the childhood cancers are a good example, but breast cancers and other types of cancer as well. Sadly, things like lung cancer we haven't done too well with, but others we're doing a reasonable kind of making reasonable inroads.
What are the main obstacles in us achieving this goal? Is it more collaboration? Is it more money?
Well, more money always helps, but I think that it's a very kind of complex issue. I think that in order to really achieve it, you need a lot of innovation. You need a lot of emphasis going into kind of recognition that it is the molecular patterns that drive the cancer, and the understanding these for an individual patient is really quite important. To be honest, the regulatory kind of environment is pretty tough to work in often, and this makes it really quite difficult to introduce new drugs, for example, into treatments. The expense of bringing a drug through into a phase 3 trial is enormous, and this really limits the number of drugs that are going to reach that stage. So there's a lot of complex kind of interactions that must go on in order for this to take place.
So tell me a little bit about your work in radiation therapy. What is radiation therapy for those of our audience members who may not know?
Well, basically, we've got a long history in radiation treatment of cancer going back for a century. In those days, the machines weren't all that kind of powerful, but they were still relatively effective. Now, about half of the patients who have cancer are treated with radiation therapy for curative intent, and also for palliation as well on top of that. So there's a real kind of range of things one can do with radiation therapy. Nowadays, the machines are terribly sophisticated. In the last 5 years, 10 years, a lot of new kind of ways of delivering radiation to tumors have evolved, which minimizes the amount of normal tissue which is in the field. It's really become a high-tech kind of approach to treating cancer. And the way it does it really is that radiation, ionizing radiation in particular, is a very good cytotoxication. And then we have ways in which we can get a therapeutic benefit out of either shaping the beam using physics, or we can use fractionation to really exploit differences in the biology between normal tissue and tumor tissue. So radiation is really a kind of frontline treatment for many cancers.
And then, how do you figure out exactly the dose, and at what point do you give radiation therapy?
Well, really, your kind of the dose has evolved in the sense that this is 100 years of experience goes into picking the dose that you use for a particular cancer in a particular condition. And often radiation therapy is used along with surgery or chemotherapy or biological targeted agents as well. So the dose really depends upon the clinical situation. And it's that the clinician then kind of decides what dose to give.
And then what are the different types of radiation therapy? I've heard there's external beam radiation therapy, and I've heard they're now putting implants of seeds into the location of the tumor to actually spread the radiation right there.
Yeah, I mean, most of the treatments are external beam, but there's also a thing called brachytherapy, which again has a very, very old history, where radium initially was kind of injected into tumors in the form of seeds. And that can either be, that comes in many different types of forms, but the basic principle is that you have a radioactive source actually within the tumor, and because the radiation dose falls off with the square root of distance, then this means the dose falls off relatively rapidly, so you can give a very high dose to the tumor without damaging the normal tissue which is surrounding it. External beam radiation therapy again takes many different forms these days, with different kind of energies that you can use depending upon how deep-seated it is. You can use protons or gamma rays or X-rays. There are many different ways to deliver it. We're getting to the stage now where, in fact, all of this is being combined with imaging, so that we can actually image the tumor and treat it more or less at the same time, and the aim is to make it more or less real time, and so that this will be really a considerable advance over the old days.
So you would say radiation therapy is a very individualized therapy. It's unique to each patient.
It's individualized in the sense that certainly the treatment planning is unique to each patient. The treatments often vary depending upon the patient, the type of tumor. But we at the moment are struggling to kind of incorporate into that the molecular profiles, because the molecular profiling of tumors is still quite expensive and quite difficult to do, but if we actually again know the signal transduction pathways that dictate the tumor behavior, then we'll be able to tailor the treatment even better. And this applies to chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and even surgery for that matter. From a radiation perspective, the important issue is that these signal transduction pathways actually determine how easy the tumor is to kill. So these are kind of survival pathways that some cancers have, which would be nice to attack. So we would need less radiation dose essentially.
And then, is it absolutely required for radiation therapy to kill all the cancer cells in the tumor so resistance doesn't form?
It's a very good question, and I don't think anybody knows exactly the answer to that. I think certainly the vast majority have to be killed or should be killed. Either that or the tumor will come back again. Now, it's possible that if the immune system is functioning and you can get an immune response against the tumor, then the immune response will be quite good at perhaps kind of clearing up minimal residual disease. And that it would be quite an advantage, I think, in many circumstances. So some of our research really is to try and translate radiation-induced cell kill into an anti-tumor immune response, so that it can clear up anything that is left, essentially, in the radiation site, and also outside. So they might attack micromets, for example, micrometastases, which are distant from the site, which are very difficult to see with conventional imaging, or with any type of imaging, but often will recur down the line.
So, in essence, we can increase the capabilities of the immune system to fight off the cancer better for us, in a sense.
Yes, and radiation itself can act as an immunological adjuvant to stimulate immune responses, so that whenever you treat the tumor, you can stimulate an immune response. The issue is to try and maximize that response and really overcome some of the kind of negative regulatory kind of mechanisms that the body kind of kicks into place by a very natural kind of process, essentially. But we can moderate that these days, and we're working very hard to try and do this so that we'll be able to combine immunotherapy with radiation therapy.
What do you think needs to be done, in essence, in regards to the information overload we currently have?
We're able to store an enormous amount of information and get a lot of information from the systems that we're using. On the downside is that we have to be able to understand it for some time. We're involved in a lot of high throughput screening for drugs that affect radiation responses, and we use commercial industrial strength computers to store that information, to share it with others in the community, and really to analyze it as well, so that they have very powerful analytical tools that we use in order to get hold of information from these data. Amazing how much information is out there, where science is not being incorporated perhaps as well as it could be into these systems. So we rely, I think, probably too much upon new information rather than old, tried information.